Hey guys, it's Vina and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some books that I think are just a little bit overhyped. So before I get into the list, I just want to clear something up. When I say that a book is overhyped, I am not saying that that book is bad. I don't think that the two terms are synonymous in any way. When I say that I think a book is overhyped, what I mean is that I think that maybe the book in question just doesn't deserve quite as much hype as it got or is getting, or the book just can't live up to what the hype has made it to be anymore. It's just been so overhyped that even though the book itself could be really good, the hype has just made it out to be something too perfect for the book to live up to. So obviously, I'm not saying that any of these books are bad. All of the books on this list are books that I rated 3 stars or more. There are no books on this list that I rated under 3 stars. Those I'm saving for a different video. So with that out of the way, let's just get into the list. So I divided the list into 2 parts. So the first part is going to be books that I just personally don't think deserved quite as much hype as they got or are getting. And the second part of the list is just books that I think have been overhyped to the point where they can't live up to the hype anymore. So starting off with the books that I think don't deserve quite as much hype as they got or are getting, I'm going to start with The Rangers Apprentice by John Flanagan. So this series was very hyped a while back. I don't know if it's still hyped, but honestly, I just didn't think that it was as good as the hype made it out to be. This series is about a boy named Will who is apprenticed to a ranger, and it's about his adventures as an apprentice ranger and then eventually as a ranger himself. These books don't really follow a continuous plot line all the way through. They're kind of disjointed, almost like episodes in a TV show. These books are enjoyable, they're fun, but I don't think that they deserved quite as much hype as they got. The characters were ultimately forgettable or stereotypical, and the plots were fun, action-y plots, but weren't brilliant either, you know? I would compare them to action movies where, you know, it's a fun watch. There's a lot of, you know, car chase scenes and fights and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's not going to change your life. I feel like that's how I felt with The Rangers Apprentice. I read these a very long time ago, back when I was still closer to the target audience. And I only ended up reading to book 6, I believe, and then just stopped. And I honestly, at this point, don't feel the motivation to pick up the rest of the books. Again, I think these books were enjoyable. I just don't think they deserved quite as much hype as they got at the time. So the next book that I want to talk about is also a middle grade, and that is Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. This book follows Sophie Foster, who is an ordinary girl who one day discovers that she isn't actually all that ordinary. She's not actually human, and she discovers a whole new world that she knew nothing about. I had very high hopes for this book. I'd heard a lot of great things about it going in. I actually bought this book solely for the hype, and the hype disappointed me. Overall, I just feel like, while it is a fun middle grade, it didn't go anywhere new. It didn't do things that I hadn't already seen before. And so while I was reading it, I just kept waiting for the point when I would finally understand what everyone else was raving about. I kept reading and wondering, okay, when's the good stuff coming? When am I going to find out why everyone's hyping this up? And so by the time I got to the end, I was just very disappointed overall. It's not a bad book by any means, and I think that part of it might be because I am not the target audience. My little sister, who read the first book after I passed it on to her, loves the series. She's read all 8 books that are currently out multiple times, like 6, 7, 8 times maybe. She just adores the series. She loves them so much. She even writes fan fiction about it. And so it just might be that I've just grown beyond the target audience and the books aren't meant for me anymore. But I do see a lot of people who aren't the target audience hyping this up, and so I don't understand, like, what am I missing? I honestly don't know what I'm missing. But yeah, it could just be that I'm not the target audience. It's probably the reason. I'm just not the target audience. The next book that I want to talk about is Divergent by Veronica Roth. I don't think that this book is bad. I rated it 3 stars on Goodreads. So this is about a girl named Triss who lives in a society where people are divided into these factions that are each based on a virtue. And when she goes in for her testing to decide what faction she belongs to, she finds out that she is actually divergent, which means that she doesn't fit in any of the factions. So she has to keep this a secret because the Divergent are considered to be dangerous by the society. And that's kind of the premise for how the book begins. This book overall, I enjoyed the plot, but I really didn't like Triss that much, and I hated 4. I really hated 4. So overall, I think that the plot just really carried this book, but as the series progressed, the plots got weaker and the world building also went way downhill. And so by the last book, I just really wasn't enjoying myself anymore. It's been a while since I read these books, and so I don't know if my opinions would change now, but as it stands, I just really didn't enjoy these books as much as everyone else seems to. I do intend to pick up the first book again at some point in the future. That's why I'm still hanging on to this copy, but I don't know when that'll be, and honestly, I don't feel rushed to do it. There's other books out there that I'm more interested in reading first. The next book that I want to talk about is a book that I'm so sad is even on this list because I really wanted this book to be a new favorite. I actually thought it was going to be a new favorite, and that is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I am so sad that this book is even on this list because I did really want to love it. I was so excited because I don't tend to enjoy a lot of YA fantasy. There are a few that I've read that I do enjoy, but overall I just tend to feel very meh about them. And while I was reading the opening of this, I felt so excited about finally finding a YA fantasy that I actually loved, and my hopes were just squashed. So this book follows 2 protagonists. We have Laia, whose brother has been arrested by the Empire, who is oppressing her people, and she makes a deal with the Resistance to spy on the commandant of this school in exchange for the Resistance to get her brother back. And we're also following the point of view of Elias, who is the son of the commandant and is training to become one of these super soldiers, as it were, that are called masks in this world. So we switch between these 2 points of view. At first, I was really enjoying this book. I thought the world had the potential to be super interesting. I liked both of the main characters, but as the book progressed, I just got more and more frustrated, particularly by the romance in this book. So this book was sold to me as a slow burn romance. This book was not a slow burn romance. The characters really only interacted 3 times before they were professing their love to each other, and that made 0 sense to me. Just because the main characters are only professing their love for each other here does not make it a slow burn. And so that was really frustrating. And I am going to have to briefly talk about spoilers here. So if you haven't read this book and don't want spoilers for it, just skip to the timestamp. I'll put a timestamp on the screen. So basically, at the climax of the novel, the romance is used as a motivating factor in why Elias chooses not to kill Laia in a final test of loyalty to the Empire. And while I don't think that this is a bad thing to do by any means, the romance just wasn't developed enough to make me understand. And honestly, I don't feel like it was necessary. If Elias and Laia had just been friends prior to this, I still would have understood why he refused to kill her. Even if they didn't even know each other, I would still understand. Because here's the thing, his whole character arc was built around his growing disillusionment with his empire's ideals. And so it would be very interesting to me, even if he didn't know Laia personally, if the final turning point in his character arc was him refusing to kill for his mother, for the commandant who represented the Empire's ideals. And I just think that that would be very interesting. We didn't have to have a romance element to make that decision realistic. That's my personal opinion. Also, if you wanted a romance, this series has 4 books. So, you know, the romance could have been developed over multiple books. It didn't have to happen in the first book. We could have just seen development, you know, until maybe book 3 or whatever. And then we could have seen a better, more realistic growth in their relationship as opposed to it seeming more like insta-love and not like slow burn at all. I am planning on continuing with this series because I do own the second book, and I just hope that it'll get better, because I am very disappointed that I didn't love this book, because I really, really wanted to. It just disappointed me overall. The next book that I want to talk about is one that I actually gave 4 stars, so I don't think it's a bad book by any means. I just think that it's been talked about and hyped for the wrong reasons, and that is A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. So this book follows Charlotte Holmes, who is the descendant of Sherlock Holmes, and Jamie Watson, who is the descendant of James Watson, as they attend this Connecticut prep school and end up becoming the prime suspects in a murder investigation. So I enjoyed this book. I thought it was solid. It's not the best book that I've read, but I enjoyed it. The thing is, this book is marketed as a mystery, and I see a lot of people recommending it as a great mystery novel, and I'm just sitting here thinking it wasn't actually that great of a mystery novel. I personally didn't enjoy the mystery. I thought that it was underdeveloped. I think that it just wasn't given enough page time. I did really like the setup for the mystery. I thought that it had potential to be a really good mystery, but the way that it ended up resolving was just not my cup of tea. And I can't really say more without getting into spoilers, but just overall, I just think that the mystery ended up being a side plot to the main relationship that was going on, the character development, and that's fine, but then don't market it as a mystery novel. So I just ended up being disappointed by the fact that it didn't do what I wanted it to. I wanted it to be a great twisty mystery novel, and it just didn't deliver on that. So if you're looking for a YA book with some fun characterization, I might check this book out. But if you're looking for a good mystery, look elsewhere. The next book that I want to talk about is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This book is about a girl who is an apprentice librarian, and in this world, librarians are the defenders of these magical books, which I think is just a fantastic premise. I bought this book in part because of the cover, in part because of the premise, and in part because of the hype. I'd heard so many good things about this book before I bought it, and I was expecting it to be really, really good, but I just ended up being kind of disappointed. This book started out with a really, really great atmosphere. I really liked the opening chapter, but as the book progressed, I was just more and more disappointed. Again, I feel like the romance just wasn't given proper development, and I feel like the plot went in a little bit of a stereotypical direction that I don't think it had to go in. I don't feel like the book had to go in the direction of let's save the world, you know? And I also just didn't connect with the main character, Elizabeth. I didn't like her very much, but I did like some of the side characters, and I loved the premise. I don't think that this is a bad book by any means, but I just overall think that there are better books out there. I'm sad that I didn't like this. I know a lot of people did, but I just didn't like it as much as I wanted to. So that concludes part 1 of this list, which was all the books that I think don't deserve quite as much hype as they got or are getting. And the next part of this list is going to be the books that I think just can't live up to the hype anymore. They've just been hyped to the point where I think it's impossible for the books themselves to live up to what the hype has made them out to be. And so with that in mind, I'm going to start with a book that I actually plan on rereading multiple times because I loved it so, so much, and that is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. So this book is about a boy named Laszlo Strange, who is a librarian and is obsessed with this lost city of Weep. He spends a lot of time researching this place, and then one day an ambassador from this city comes to his city, and that's kind of how the book starts. So I loved this book. I really did. I thought that it was incredible. I loved the writing. I thought Laszlo was an excellent main character. I loved that he was a librarian. I really enjoyed how weird this was. I honestly didn't expect it to be quite as weird as it ended up being, but it ended up being kind of weird and whimsical, and I really loved that. So I did enjoy a lot about this book, and I can see myself rereading it multiple times because like I said, I thought it was a wonderful book. But here's the thing. When I started reading this book, I knew it was super hyped. I had heard so many good things about this book, and I had just heard so many people saying that it was one of the most fantastic, most amazing books that they'd ever read, and I wasn't really seeing a lot of criticism for it. So when I went into it, I had high expectations. I did. And I think that the hype kind of let me down on this one. The book itself was amazing, but I think that the hype just made it out to be something perfect, when in reality, no art can be perfect. And so the hype disappointed me. The book didn't disappoint me, the hype disappointed me. I do really, really love this book, and so I feel bad including it on this list, but I do think that it is a little bit overhyped, and I just don't think the hype works in its favor anymore. And the last book that I want to talk about is one that is probably the most controversial book that I have on this list, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So this book is about a team of misfits and criminals who team up in order to attempt to break into the most secure fortress in the world. And so this is a fantasy heist novel. You probably know all about this already, even if you haven't read it, because it is one of the most hyped books in the YA community and probably in the book community in general. Now, I liked this book. I thought that it was good. But I do think that there were some big issues with it that I just don't see getting talked about a lot. I did like the heist plot, but I do feel like there were points in the story that were supposed to be shocking plot twists, but in reality just hadn't gotten enough build-up. It was like the author was keeping secrets from the readers, and so at times it was a little bit frustrating and annoying because something would happen that just hadn't gotten any foreshadowing at all, and so instead of being shocking, just ended up being irritating instead because it just hadn't been given enough build-up. I feel like this series could probably have done without the romance plots that developed, and I know that that's a very unpopular opinion as well, but I think this book would have been better if it had no romance at all. None. And I can talk more about this in another video if you'd like. I would love to discuss my opinions with you guys. So if you'd like to see a video where I break down all of the things that I think could have been done better in Six of Crows, just let me know in the comments. And the last thing that I just want to briefly touch on is something that may seem like a little bit of a weird complaint, but that's the fact that the characters weren't as dark as I'd heard they were going to be. I expected morally gray characters. I expected very morally gray characters. And obviously they did do some horrible things. There is one scene in particular in this book that is extremely gruesome, and you probably, if you've read Six of Crows, you probably know which scene I'm referring to. But overall, I expected the members of Kaz's crew and Kaz himself especially to be a lot darker than they ended up being. Their backstories were very dark, but the characters themselves weren't as dark as I expected. And that isn't a complaint about the book itself, but I do feel like that some of the character development would have been more powerful if some of the characters had been a bit darker. And that sounds horrible, but I can go into full spoiler discussion about why I think that in a Six of Crows criticism video, if you'd like me to make one. But yeah, I don't want to get into all of that here. Overall, I did really enjoy this book. I think that it's one of the best YA fantasy books I've read, and I think that it's really good, but I don't think that it's quite as flawless as the hype makes it out to be. And I think that it's worth discussing the flaws with this book as well. That's my unpopular opinion of the day. So that's my list of all the books that I think are just a little bit overhyped. Do you agree with any of the books that I had on this list? Would you add any? Would you remove any? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content. I post videos every Monday and Friday. I will see you guys again very soon. Bye.